Welcome, everyone, to Ladder Daily Digest. We honor creators, and we've had Kevin Hinckley on before, both as a guest and co-host. Today, we thought we would talk about the modern history of the Holy Land and how Kevin got involved in tours. And in a few weeks or so, we'll do a virtual tour of the Holy Land and see if that either A, helps people with insomnia, or B, people are thrilled by seeing all the pictures of the Holy Land that Kevin has.
Well, to be honest with you, Gene, if the ceasefire holds, I may be able to do it in country.
Wow. So that's,
and we're going
to tease that as part of the modern history is what's been happening historically the last few months and weeks even, and what the word on the street is about that. So let's see. Kevin, tell us about what started your interest in the Holy Land as like a 3-year-old or however old you were.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I was, I would have had to have been fairly young when growing up in the church and always kind of hearing Bible stories and things like that. But then somewhere probably in my early teens or something like that, the Cleon Skousen wrote a book on the 1967 war called Fantastic Victory, which is an amazing, miraculous thing all by itself. How Israel defends itself in a 6-day war when they were on the verge of annihilation and the UN is pulling out, and how it is that Israel, the tactics they use to defend themselves and defeat all of these nations and do it in 6 days was unbelievable. So I probably read that over and over and memorized a lot of the details. And that just
they had to do it in 6 days because the Sabbath.
And then they rested, right? Exactly. That's how it works. What a surprise.
And so you read that book, and did you learn about the cities, the terrains, the maps? Were there maps involved in the book and stuff?
Yeah, there were, because you got to start getting the topography down on that. You got to know what they're talking about. So, and then
the political aftermath of it.
Yeah, well, yeah, because that's 67, and there's another war in 73. And so you had the battle in 48, and then there's a 67 war, and then there's 73, and it's just like even 20 years ago the Intifada going on, and and you put that against the backdrop of what's going on currently. What's been going on since October 6th last year.
And I don't know if you've seen Heretic yet, but one of the sister missionaries creates a scenario that's very unique. She creates a scenario that involves pornography that proves the church is true. Similarly, the Holy War, in a way, to you, proved the church true, right? If God is watching after the Israel, then he's watching after the Mormon church as well.
Oh, when you mentioned Holy War, I just thought you meant BYU beating Utah.
Right, but there's that too.
Which then proves the church is true because BYU won this time. It hasn't been true for a few years, but now it's back to being true again. But anyway, that really fired my interest. And as a matter of fact, dumb little teaser here, I was always interested in enough, and then I was interested in some meteorology stuff when I was in high school. So in my senior year, when the school counselor drags me in to say, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I said, "I want to be a weatherman in Israel." And she looked at me like, "Okay, fruitcake."
Yeah, that's pretty specific in a weird way. That's pretty specific.
You want to be a weatherman in Israel. But it just meant I'd always wanted to go to Israel.
Right. And I took a geography class in community college, and I was surprised about how much geography affects weather. Yeah. It hadn't dawned on me up to that point. There's a lot of geography in the Holy Land.
It didn't matter to me ultimately about the meteorology and stuff. I just want to be in Israel.
It was just an excuse.
Yes, absolutely. And so it's always that way now. It's always I'm just always glad to be walking around in Israel. That's just where I want to be. So
yeah. Then life happens, you get older, and then what continues your interest?
Well, the interest was always there, and certainly the fact that I've been teaching classes continuously for 25 years. I mean, I was a gospel doctrine teacher for 7, and And then I was able, through some of the things that I was doing here, to be fortunate enough to speak at Education Week at BYU for 15 years, 16 years, and actually turned it down this year to actually do it again. So I've been involved in teaching. So anybody with any religious interest, doesn't matter whether you're Mormon or Catholic or Protestant or whatever, you got to go to the Holy Land. That's just where it all happens.
It's ground zero.
Well, and that's one of the vibes that you get while you're there. Is I think that one of the last times we were there in the Garden Tomb, as I was bringing my group into the Garden Tomb area where supposedly Jesus was buried. It's right next to Golgotha, so-called. There was a group from Africa, and they were coming in singing and dancing in unison. They had arrived in the Holy Land, and they were beyond excited, and they were just. So even while we're trying to hold classes, and I'm trying to teach a class in a little area of the Garden Tomb, you can hear these guys singing and rocking, and they're just excited to be here. And to be honest, Gene, that's those moments, and I'm aware of it, whether we're in the Tomb of the Holy Sepulchre or whether we're on the Mount of Beatitudes, wherever we are. Anybody who goes to these places, you kind of, even the Jordan River, you go away kind of desiring to be better. I want to be a better Christian as a result of having been here. And I think regardless of where you think Jesus was buried, you go away from your experience in the Holy Land thinking, I want to be better. I just want to be a better Christian. I've been here. I feel it.
There's a hymn or whatever, I walked where Jesus walked.
Yeah. Yeah, even if you're doing the Villa Dolorosa down through the old city, you just want to be better. And so everybody walking away from there is going to, I think, is bettered by having visited.
We could do a quick, you talked about the wars in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's impossible, but explain sort of like in a couple minutes what the history of the Holy Land since Jesus will say.
Yeah, that would be tough. Because again, when you're walking through, doesn't matter where we're going, Israel is layered, and it's layered, and so you're having to, and so looking at the temple walls around the old city, it's like, okay, this is Solomon era, this is Roman area, here's Greek, here is Ottoman, here's the Crusaders period of time. The Ottomans did this to this. So it's layered all the way through. And in fact, little point of history, the very last Ottomans, the Muslims coming out of Istanbul, where they were finally driven out and in controlling the whole country, is what is called the Charge the Light Brigade. And it's one of the last battles of World War I at Beersheba. And it's the Australian Charge the Light Brigade that's driving out the Ottoman defenders. That sets up the Balfour Doctrine about a few Jews are going to be able to have some ability to return, but not much until the horrors of the Holocaust come out. And now it's like, no, we really do need to establish something. And so that's why the war ends in 45, and the state of Israel, sanctioned by the UN, happens in 48. But at that moment in 48, now you're having to displace generations of people that have been living in Palestine around Tel Aviv and even, most of Jerusalem and the West Bank, Bethlehem, all those. You got to displace them. So they are moved out of there. And Israel has this weird little shaped country that include a third of Jerusalem and all of that. And then in 67, and Egypt is attacking across Sinai and Lebanon from the north, and you've got Syria and Jordan coming across the Transjordan. They're coming in to attack. Israel conquers all of them, and suddenly they now push out from the river to the sea, which is the Palestinian cry of, it should be Palestine, from the river to the sea, meaning from the Jordan to the ocean. Israel now is in control of all of that, including the Sinai. But that meant displacing an awful lot of Palestinians. And since then, those Palestinians living in Gaza and West Bank and all that, they're they're displaced, and so they're a little bit like Native Americans that have been put onto reservations, which is really what Gaza has been. It's been a reservation. It's, they sometimes call it a prison without ceilings, because they have been crammed onto that. And every time that's opened up, Hamas uses the reason to start bombing buses and stuff like that and discotheques in Israel. So then they got to build a wall and that stopped the attacks, but it really has isolated the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, and given Hamas a chance to foment, prepare for war.
And so it's essentially both sides think very poorly of the other side.
Well, it's even a little more complicated than that. In that, if you remember, you don't have to go back very few years. You remember the long-running battle between Iraq and Iran. This was a battle within Sunni and Shiite forces. Iran being kind of the seat of this radicalized part of Islam under Shiite, and Saudi Arabia and all those, that's Sunni. And the Sunnis make up about 75% of Muslims in the world. Shiite are about 25%, but because they're far more radical, they're the ones that tend to foment things. So if you go into Gaza, for instance, 75, 80, 90% of Gazans are Sunni, and they're more aligned with Saudi Arabia and Egypt, but those guys don't want them because they're kind of like the Beverly Hillbillies of Muslim world. They are isolated. They're like West Virginia, they're just, and they don't want them. So every time the Palestinians are displaced, you don't see Lebanon and Saudi Arabia and Egypt all taking them in. They don't want them. But they're similarly, they're religious wise, but Hamas, even though it's more Sunni, is now the more radical side of that, wanting to say we want our land back. Okay, that's Hamas.
And so they're like the Danites of.
Yeah, we'll attack. We will. There'll be retribution on our side. We're going to stir stuff up. We will get arms from wherever we can get it. We don't care. Danite would probably be a good way to characterize Hamas. We're the same religion, but where most of the Palestinians, if Hamas wasn't there, they could tear down that wall, and most of those Palestinians can work in the rest of Israel. And when that works, that's really well. Most of those guys are very sweet people. You work with them, you talk to them, they're great. But the problem is that they've got this radical side inside their Hamas that they can't control, and it wheedles its way into the Palestinian Authority, and nobody. And if you're gonna push back against Hamas in Gaza, you're dead. You'll be dead. So they can't really. We'll hold elections. Well, Arafat kept getting elected. We can't fight. Hamas controls that thing, even though they're like 10% of the entire population and radicalized. And
is it true that, in a way, the Muslims want to exterminate the Jews or Israelis?
Hamas does.
Just Hamas?
Hamas. The Palestinians would be okay with Israel being there, but their problem is, and there's never going to be there's no way to get even if you said we're going to go in today and have a 2-state possibility, we're going to have the Palestinian nation and we're going to have the Israeli country, okay? Can't do that, because for the Palestinians, they would say that it all hinges on something called the right to return. And that is, the Palestinians say, we have a right to return to our homelands that were there prior to 1948 and prior to 1967. And a lot of that land, for instance, isn't right in the middle of Tel Aviv. And you go to Tel Aviv, it's like going to Miami Beach. It is cosmopolitan, amazing hotels and beaches. Tel Aviv is amazing. But a lot of that old Palestinian homeland is there. It's in Haifa. It's in 2/3 of Jerusalem. And they'd have to say, we're going to do a two-country state. Well, Israel would have to abandon most of Tel Aviv, which was like the capital, but just a small portion of it, to give these country bumpkins their homelands back. And that's not going to happen. And it's easy to sit in the U.S. Congress or the UN and go, we'll just make Gaza a country. And that would be like saying to the Cherokee Nation, you guys are going to be your own country, but you don't get any of your former homelands back. You're stuck on the reservation where we stuck you. Mormons had the same treatment in Missouri. They got stuck in a county, Caldwell County. Stay on your reservation, and then they wouldn't stay on their reservation. The Palestinians wouldn't stay on their reservation in Gaza if the walls were torn down, and they want their homelands back.
And the Hamas faction, they want basically the destruction of Israel. It's hard to negotiate when one side doesn't want to compromise at all.
I think it was in the Darkest Hour with Winston Churchill. Great movie where he's talking, one of the great portrayals of Winston Churchill, and he's trying to say to his war cabinet in that movie, as they're talking about, do we appease Hitler? And he say, you can't negotiate with a tiger with your head in its mouth.
I think Neville Chamberlain was the guy that was kept on appeasing Hitler, and Hitler would say that if you give us this land, it's the last of our demands, and then there kept on being more last of our demands.
Yeah,
so it's hard to appease.
That's why Netanyahu said that's after October 8th. We're just leveling Gaza. We'll rebuild the thing, and it's going to cost a lot of money to rebuild, but we got to go through and clean out the tunnels. We got to clean out all the stuff that they were doing while we were appeasing. And then he went, and he's overly harsh. But what was happening before was under appeasing. So it really was that kind of deal.
And when did you first go to the Holy Land?
About 10 years ago. I was doing tours for Bountiful Travel and taking people to Mesoamerica, and so we Panama and Costa Rica, and I was doing a number of tours, and then.
How long ago did you start that?
About 10 years ago.
Oh, so you quickly added the Holy Land as part of the tour package.
Yeah, I finally had a chance. Dave Hadlock is a friend of mine that owns Bountiful Travel, and after we had been doing some trips in Mesoamerica, and he saw that I could work with groups and that I speak in each one of those places, and that had gone well. We finally, he took a bus and I took a bus in Israel, and we kind of ran side-by-side trips because, and that's usually the way it happens now. We did one with John By the Way last year where we actually had 3 buses, and as we went around to some of these different sites. So yeah, it's been.
So do you want to talk about the different things that have happened over the last 10 years within Israel and the politics as it relates to?
Yeah, because I think where people would be interested at the moment. One of the reasons I was supposed to be there. I was just supposed to be just coming back just prior to Thanksgiving from our trip to Israel, and then we're supposed to be there again in March, and we'll be there again next year. But
because you have to start selling seats like a year before you go, right?
Well, here's the problem. Even before October 6th, I was taking a group across the Upper Galilee, we're coming up around the Sea of Galilee, going towards Caesarea Philippi, and I'm having them look out across what looks like Iowa, and it is the fruit and garden belt of the Middle East, really. That the whole valley of Megiddo and all the way across there, the fruit is unbelievable in that northern part of Israel. It's just off the charts.
So lots of orchards.
So many orchards and olive groves and all of the vineyards and all of that up into the Golan Heights and stuff like that. Best fruit I've ever tasted anywhere. And as we're driving across there, I said to them, "Anybody feel unsafe?" Like, no, it looks like we're in Idaho. Well, yeah. And so most of the time, I've never felt unsafe in Israel, ever. But I've been there. And if you said to me, could you go back this weekend? I'd go this weekend, because you get to know how good the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force is, and you get to know how protective they are. And as long as you're not hanging out next to the border of Gaza, where October 6th happened, Israel is incredibly safe. But selling safety to people that have never been to Israel
and only hear the news,
they only hear the news, they only watch this stuff, and it freaks them out. And so, yeah, it's always a little bit harder. So there's always a bit of a PR job. And I can't tell you right now, and I would say Bountiful Travel can't tell you right now how our bookings will end up for this coming March, even if we're able to go. Probably a 50-50 shot. It just depends on how well the ceasefire that was just announced holds. Because it's one thing to be in the south of Israel in
there are certain hot
Judean
spots.
desert next to Gaza versus being in the northern Galilee area. Now when we're in the Golan Heights, just before we get to Caesarea Philippi, we're looking over at the mountains of Lebanon. Lebanon's right there, and their battle is not with Hamas. Their battle is with Hezbollah. And Hezbollah is the far more dangerous of the two, believe it or not. We now have records as they were gone into southern Lebanon and attacked and stuff like that. We now have records that tell us that what Hezbollah was planning in doing in northern Israel, it was 100 times larger. 100 times larger than what Hamas did outside of Gaza at that music festival, on October 6th. 100 times larger. They had a massive scale because the Hezbollah is Shia. They're very tied into Iran. They keep the Lebanese army weak, and they run with a lot more impunity in Lebanon than Hamas is able to do in Gaza. They can come and go. They don't have the restrictions. So Hezbollah was planning something really large, really bad. And now we have the IDF has degraded most of that Hezbollah structure in southern Lebanon dramatically. But that's what made that a little more dangerous, because when you're in Nazareth, when you're in up in that direction, you're not that far away from Lebanon's an hour drive.
And so, how does the recent ceasefire look to you? Do you know enough about it to say, here's where, if it lasts this long, it's looking like it's going to last longer?
If you're what's preliminarily coming out, Gene, is, and what I'm hearing and what I'm reading and what I'm hearing from my guide, my buddy in Jerusalem, who was our local guide when we're on the ground. What's happening there is that Hezbollah, because you'll notice the ceasefire isn't with Hamas. The ceasefire is with Hezbollah, and Hezbollah, who is very very Shia, had all of those fortifications and stuff like that, and Israel has been selectively targeting Hezbollah leaders, installations, arm depots, even going into Beirut to go get those guys. And I have to tell you, one of the most amazing, someday they need to make a movie about what they did with the pagers, with the Hezbollah pagers. Remember that one? They worked with a company, Mossad worked with a company that they had taken out all of their cell towers. So now the only way that the Hezbollah leaders were going to contact each other was going to be by pagers. And
so they have tracking devices on them?
No, they put explosives in them. They
Wow.
put explosive in all of these pagers and then sold them specifically to all these leaders of Hezbollah. And then on a signal, detonated all of these pagers all at the same time. So now, and it's a small explosion. So now you're not blowing up a school or something like that. You're blowing up just within that dude, and you're getting them all at once. That was the most amazing operation for keeping collateral damage, but only blowing up the bad guys in the middle of a crowd. That one operation was over the top successful in degrading dramatically Hezbollah's leadership structure in Lebanon.
So Hezbollah is seen like a writing on the wall. If we don't do a ceasefire, then we might not exist.
Hezbollah they wouldn't do it on their own. That word would come from Tehran, and it did. Tehran has said to the few remaining leaders of Hezbollah in Lebanon, stop. I mean, because we're about to lose all of this. If we let this keep going, Hezbollah will be wiped out, and we will lose our influence. And if they do that, then Lebanon could actually regroup and get strong enough to keep, because remember, 75 to 80% of Lebanon is Sunni. And the Shia keep getting in the way of their having normalization with Israel in commerce and growth and everything that could be happening in Lebanon. And your parallel to the Danites in Missouri is well put, because it'd be like we're getting run out of Missouri and far west because we've got Samson Avard and the Danites in the middle of Missouri that are stirring up all kinds of garbage. And now we all get thrown out because of the actions of this small little group. Well, that's what happened with Hezbollah in Lebanon, for sure.
And so what's happening with Hamas? And Israel doesn't need to do a ceasefire with them because they're systematically.
It's gone. For the moment, they're scattered. They're in camps. The tunnels that they were being able to somehow get arms to them from even places like North Korea and stuff like that. That's all been degraded, and so they don't need to do a ceasefire with Hamas, basically, because number one, Hamas would never ever say, okay, we're going to stop fighting, because we are the voice of the Palestinian people and we need our land back. So all you can do with those guys is imprison them when you find them. But now we're going to put in all kinds of humanitarian aid to start rebuilding, so that the Gazans have a place to live. Right now they don't. They're just stuck in camps.
Right.
It's horrific. It really is horrific.
And so the ceasefire is looking promising to you.
It is, because if that will hold and allow the U.S. and Israel to strengthen Lebanon, then it just makes the northern border much safer. And I think as long as, and like I said, I think that starts to happen Now, our trip in March, people still read headlines, and airlines still read headlines, which means, like a couple of times that we've been in Israel, we've been on a cruise ship that was doing
Stops.
Athens and Ephesus and was going to stop in Haifa and Ashdod. If there's things going on in Israel,
and they
cruise
eliminate
line will go, how about we do Santorini and Crete instead, because we're not going to be able to land in Haifa, because Haifa is really near the Lebanese border. I mean, that's the highest seaport up there.
Is there any stats on collateral damage to tourism? Have there been tourist buses that have been attacked or?
Oh, no. The attack, the closest they came to that at the height of this thing from Hezbollah, and one of the things that caused Israel to shift from Gaza and then start a second operation in Lebanon, was that they were raining some missiles down onto Haifa and then some to Tel Aviv. There were several that landed actually near the airport, and even a little bit south, getting close to some really historical places in Joppa, and a couple landed. And there was a shooting, I think, in Joppa. But by and large, it's not the tour buses. I mean, Gene, if they're gonna take a school bus of Israeli kids from Jerusalem down to Masada, they'll have an armed guard with them. When we go all the way down to Aqaba on the Red Sea, and then come up like we're going to Petra, and then up to Amman on our tour bus, we'll have a Jordanian soldier with a sidearm. Not because we're going to be attacked, but they just don't take any chances with tourists. The people in Bethlehem are dying here, man. This is the holiday season coming up, and if you've ever been to the Church of Nativity, man, they just live and die by all the tourists coming up to the Church of Nativity, and there are Palestinians that are going to be really starving and hurt tremendously every time this happens. They were just recovering from COVID, and now to have something like this, that they're just hurting the Palestinian people that thrive on tourists. So you're not attacking tourists. They're gonna be pretty careful about that.
Okay, so you see a brighter outlook for the tourism.
Yeah.
Like I say, in a week or two, we'll get a show out as a virtual tour of the Holy Land, sort of as a taste of what people can expect.
What they could see. That's right.
What they could see, and
what they should see.
A picture is worth 1,000 words. How many words is it worth to just be in 3D right there in the real place?
It would be kind of fun if we're able to do something in Israel when that finally happens.
Yeah,
and let's standing in Caesarea and show you the amphitheater and all that.
Now you mentioned that being in the Holy Land was exciting for the Africans. What was it like for you the first time you were there?
Oh, thrilling.
But you didn't sing and dance and shout?
Actually, we did. One of the things that we do, and we'll talk about this more at another time, when we bring our groups through, we always charter a trip out on the Sea of Galilee. And after teaching a class out on the Sea of Galilee,
how to walk on water.
Well, yeah. Then we sing and dance, which is funny, and you'd understand this. One of the last times we were on the boat, I taught my class, and then I said to the captain, I said, "Hey, we're ready for the Hava Nagila. Let's do this." And he goes, "Wait! You're missing a song." And I said, "Missing a song?" And he said, yeah, you're supposed to sing another song. And I said, Captain, which song is that? And he goes, na 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 na. I said, oh, Master of the Tempest is raging. Yes, yes, you must sing that song. Oh, okay. So we sang that song, and then we danced the Hava Nagila on board the ship. But yeah, so we actually have sung and danced. But my first time standing in front of the Wailing Wall, very, very emotional. That is a very emotional experience if you've never been there.
So tell me really quickly what the Wailing Wall represents to different people.
The western wall of the ancient there on the Temple Mount is the foundational structure that was there for Solomon's temple.
So it's basically the last remaining blocks that were part of the Solomon's temple.
Yeah, and so there's a whole block. Now, up on top of that, when the Ottomans came in, they ended up building on the rock that was up on top that we think was the original threshing floor that David identified and bought from the farmer, and they built Solomon's temple, and then Herod's temple was also built on that. When the Ottomans come in what 1099? No, that's
I was going to say 1100, so I was off.
Yeah, I think that's the Crusades. So probably, yeah, I'd have to go back. Anyway, they tear down any structures, and that's when they put the Dome of the Rock on top of that. Okay, so it sits up on top. So what Israel and what the Jews have is that foundation stone at the base that's 50 feet high, and that is the most sacred spot in all of Judaism, is right at the base of that, and it's unbelievable.
The Ottoman Empire began in 1299.
Okay, so they came in after the Crusades. That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And so then it's remained the third largest, second holiest site in Islam is the Dome of the Rock, where Muhammad was supposed to have been taken up into heaven. It's on Dome of the Rock, but on the bottom of that is the
and why is it called the Wailing Wall?
Good. That if you are Orthodox, if you're a regular Jew, just to stand there and pray and have your bar mitzvah there is one thing. But if you're one of the Haredim, the Orthodox Jews, you're gonna pull the prayer shawl in front of you. You're gonna wrap the telephone around your arm. You're gonna put on your forehead, and then you're gonna bow, and then you're gonna be reciting things. And it's all these people reciting things in front of this. It sounds like they're wailing. And
because they're sort of like singing the prayer,
chanting.
Yeah. And what is the prayer's hope?
Well, a lot of it
gets rebuilt.
Well, that always comes up, but part of it is just, it's like being in a synagogue. You're just, it's a worshipful site, and so you remember you're going to do 5 prayers a day if you're a Hasidic Jew, and you're going to just choose one of those to do what you're doing, and you do that in a synagogue, but you can also do that as well and study. But you're exactly right. There are specific days where they're going to gather together to memorialize the Holocaust. They're going to come to do it on the day of the priestly blessing, the beginning of Yom Kippur, and they will always include, the prayer that you get anytime you go to Passover. Passover always ends with next year in Jerusalem. Next year in Jerusalem. We want to go back. We've been scattered. We want to go back. Unless you're a wealthy Jewish family in New York, and you go, we'll send money and we'll go visit, but we're going to hang on to our stuff here. We're not so anxious to go back and do Aliyah back to.
It's almost like the chant in baseball where they say, "Wait till next year."
It's exactly that. Yeah, it's supposed to be. Next year, you're supposed to be in Jerusalem. That's when we go home. We make pilgrimage back.
Right. And so So what does that mean to you as a Mormon, the Wailing Wall?
I always write my prayers, and I'm like anybody else. I'm putting them in there.
But in a way, it's an homage to like the Old Testament.
It is, but it's also a understanding of not just, hey, Nephi walked here in the old city, but it's also looking forward to what's going to happen in the future. When we take people to the BYU Jerusalem Center, the BYU Jerusalem Center sits on the Mount of Olives, and right over next to Hebrew University. And when you're up there and you look at the overlook, and coming down across the Cedron Valley, and there's the old city right there, and you're picturing someday Christ will return and come to the Mount of Olives and rescue his people. So by and large, it's not just that Jesus walked here and there's the beautiful gate that he probably came through, or the sheep gate. There's where he was. There is Gethsemane at our feet, and we're enthralled by being able to walk through Gethsemane. But also it's the future. What is going to happen here? What events are supposed to occur here? It's past, present, and future, Gene. They're all there, and they're all located in this one place. That if you can't read the New Testament without walking that land, and then to know what it looked like to go from on that after the Last Supper, to come down through the valley, right, and come up into that Garden of Gethsemane, past the tombs and all that.
The Wailing Wall is sort of like Stonehenge in a way. It's like proof of the existence that thousands of years ago something happened here.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. That because sometimes some of the narratives fed to kind of some of the simple Palestinians is that Israel didn't show up here until 1948, and everything else is just a myth. Oh no, it was. If you go through Hezekiah's tunnel, you're going through history. You're going through Isaiah was upstairs while this tunnel is being built, and it's there. It's living.
Well, here's one thing that just crossed my mind. Wasn't there a prediction that not one block will stand on another for the temple's destruction? And so how can the Western Wall still be up?
The temple itself was. That's why I say the foundation stones are there.
Oh,
it's not the foundation stone of the temple itself. It's the foundation stone. They're like 100-ton foundation stones that formed. Mount Moriah sits up there, and so they had to build this foundational thing before they could actually put the temple complex.
The temple was atop the Western Wall.
That is so that, and you can, when we come out of the Wailing Wall area and we go around towards the Steps of Solomon, you can see the stones that were cast down by the Roman soldiers from up on top. You can see they're still sitting there. Nobody's moving these massive stones. They're still there. So you can see where it happened.
Well, thanks for coming on our show. It made me think that there's another show we can do by itself too. Might be the history of the BYU Center.
Oh boy, there's a great story there.
Yeah.
A lot of which we can't. They won't always tell you because just out of.
Well, that's why you're here, so that you could tell us the stuff that they would never hear.
We could do that.
And we could. I don't know. You could preface it by some people say this thing occurred.
It has been said, yes.
It has been said by other people, or me even, whatever. Well, thanks for coming on the show. I hope everybody appreciates this show. I appreciate you, Kevin, and I'm glad to have you on. And I'll look forward to the other shows that we're going to do.
And if nothing else, next year in Jerusalem.
That's right. Next year in Jerusalem. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Have a great rest of the year, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.